My screen is also visible, right? Guys, my screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Perfect.
fine. Yes. So yesterday we have discussed, right, how to implement global configurations, as well as we have also discussed how to implement entity configurations. Global configuration means that is common for all the entities, or you can say entire model. Entity configuration means specific to a particular entity. Today we are going to discuss, right, property configuration. Then I will discuss, right, some other few concepts, right. So property configuration means what? Means if you want to configure any individual property, any configuration which is specific to a property, right? Then also it is possible using Fluent API. So using this Fluent API property configuration, we can specify the column name, we can specify the data type, we can specify some default value, we can specify whether the column is going to be nullable or non-nullable, right? We can specify what should be the maximum length, we can specify precision and scale, we can specify computed columns, right? And also we can also specify some kind of a concurrency tokens, right? So what we are going to do now, we'll create one application. And before creating application, first of all, I will explain this concept. What do you mean by how to configure column names, data type, default values, required and nullable properties, maximum, right? Whatever I have provided here, first of all, I will give how you can do this. And then I will ready take the example and show you all these things practically. So first of all, let's start with the column names. Right? The column names means what? See, by default, whatever your property name, right? So by default, whatever your property name, that will be created as a column name in the database, right? So this is the default behavior, and most of the time, 99% of time, this default behavior is going to work as expected. But however, there are certain scenarios, right, where you might need to specify different column name. And that is the reason because you want to align with the existing database convention, right? For example, your database convention is that, right, I'm not going to create right, whenever the column containing two word, my requirement is that the database requirement is that it should be specified by underscore. For example, first name should be created as a first name, so, or something like this one. Employee ID should be created as employee underscore ID, right? Some database having they have some already specific convention that what they need to follow. And another example you can take into consideration, right? For example, right, you are working with the database first approach, and whatever the column name that is going to be created as a right a property in the model, but that naming convention you don't want. Right. So in situations like this, you need to right what you can do, you can specify a different name. And to specify a different name, what you need to do, we need to use the Haj column name Fluent API method. How you can do this? First of all, you need to specify whichever entity you want to configure. Second, you need to specify which property of that entity I need to right, provide some kind of a configuration. And for that property, what is the configuration you want to specify? So in this case, for the customer entity, the property first name is going to be created as first underscore name in the database. Clear? How to create or how to specify a different name for right for your column? Yes or no? So for this
Yes, sir.
purpose, you have to
Yes.
use this as column name method.
Yes.
Whatever the name you want to specify as part of right, which should be created in the database. Right, that name you need to specify. So in this case, this first name will be created as first underscore name in the database. That's it. Next, you can also specify the data type. For example, right, there is some decimal data type, and I want to specify the data type should be decimal 10, comma 2. Then also it is possible, right? The same concept is there. Similarly, the way we are specifying the column name, you can also specify the column type, has column type, and whatever the data type you want to specify about this price column, that what you can set. Next one is
One
default value.
question, sir.
Yes.
Sir, suppose the has column type, it's taking the string parameter. I think correct.
Yes. So this parameter, whatever you are specifying, that is not important.
No, sir.
Important is
Sir,
whatever you are
sir,
providing, that should be SQL Server data type.
sir, I understand that one. Sir, can you please scroll up little bit?
Sorry.
Scroll up little bit. The first one. Yes, sir. What I'm saying that suppose the has column name taking the string as the parameter first name. Suppose I want to give the first name space name. I think it will not take, or it will take.
First name space name means what?
I want
So
to give
instead of underscore, you want to give this one.
Yes, yes. That one.
See, if it is acceptable by your database, then it will no issue.
Okay.
Right? It basically, see, whatever I'm specifying here, this is specific to your database. If
Yes,
in
sir.
your database, suppose you are using SQL Server database, in SQL Server, if this is not acceptable, then it will not allow. So what I'm
Okay, sir.
trying to make you understand is, if your database accepting the column name with space, then there is no issue. If your database is
Okay.
not accepting, then it is not possible. Clear? In this case,
Okay.
decimal
Yes, sir.
18 comma 2 I'm specifying. So what exactly it means? So whatever string I'm specifying here, that should be a valid data type in the database. It should be provider specific. So whatever provider I'm using, for example, currently I'm using SQL Server database. So in SQL Server, it should be a valid data type. I cannot say, right? For example, if I specify ABC, no compilation error. But whenever the database migration is going to happen, at that time it will tell this is not a valid data type in the particular database. Getting my point?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So whatever here I'm specifying, these are specific to your backend database. Similarly, the default value we have already discussed, right? There are two options. One is has a default value SQL, another one is has a default value. So what is the difference between these two? So if I'm using has a default value, then this is only applicable right from the application, right? For whenever we are sending the data from our application, from .NET Core or Entity Framework Core application to the database, at that time it is going to automatically send this value. But if I'm using has a default value SQL, it is specific to not only specific to your client application, but also it is specific to your database. For example, right? For example, if I'm using has a default value, if I'm sending a record from my application using DB context, at that time the default value pending will be sent by the framework. But if I'm inserting the data manually in my SQL Server by writing some insert statement, at that time this default value will not be set in the column. Why? Because here we are not specifying as default value SQL. As default value means only from application. As default value SQL means from both application as well as in the database. So in this case, automatically this value will be stored right in the column, whether we are sending the data from the our .NET Core application, or if we are writing some kind of a insert SQL statement directly in the SSMS. Clear? Clear or no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we can also configure some required properties, right? So for example, if we want to make any, see, guys, remember by default, if the property is non-nullable, then it is going to be required in the database. If it is nullable, then by default it is going to be a right what I can say not null column in the database. But if you want, you can also configure the same. Irrespective of nullable and non-nullable type, if I want to mark this property as required, I need to use required attribute. By default, it is required true. You can also pass the value true. If you pass the value false, then this column is going to be created as a not right as a nullable column, irrespective
The
of
label
whether
type.
right? What I can say it is a right nullable data type property or non-nullable data type property. Clear?
Yes.
Clear.
If you pass false, then it is going to be a nullable column, right? So you can also set the maximum length, right? Maximum length means the concept is going to be same for whichever entity, for whichever property, and what should be the maximum length for this property. That what you can set using has max length attribute. Clear, guys? Yes or
Yes, sir.
no? Right.
Yes.
So now, right, what I need to do, I need to configure scale and the precision, right? Also, right, so here, right, guys, remember, you might be on one question. So what is the difference between configuring data type and configuring scale and the precision? So configuring data type means you can specify the data type. This can be your integer data type. This can be your, right, Boolean data type. This can be your, right, decimal data type, right? Any data type we are specifying. And here we are setting the scale and precision. Scale and precision means only for the right decimal data type, right? What should be the scale and precision? Scale is going to specify the total number of a digit, and the precision is going to specify right the number of a decimal, right? The number of a digits after the decimal points. Clear? Clear or not?
Okay, sir.
Right. So similarly, you can also specify some kind of a computed column which value is going to be calculated based on the value of other columns, right? For example, I'm having this total price and I want to calculate this total price by multiplying the quantity and the unit price. That what I can set using has computed column SQL. So has computed column SQL means on the database side only, right? This value is going to be calculated and stored in the database. Clear?
Yes.
Right? So configuring value conversion means what? For example, right, if you are having one enum by default the data type is going to be stored as string, but instead, sorry, integer. Instead of the integer that is the enum values like 0, 1, 2, 3, I want to store the enum named constant itself in the database. Then we can also, right, what we need to do, we need to do some kind of value conversion. So here, the status consider it is an enum, and I want to represent this as a string in the database. So for that purpose, what I need to do, I need to use a hash conversion method. So whenever you are converting one data type to another data type, then in that case, right, you need to use this one. For example, here I'm converting, right, enum to string. Ideally, this is the only requirement. Otherwise, right, there is no such use of this hash conversion method. But mostly, whenever we are working with enum, and if you want to store that enum as a string value, right, we need to use this as conversion method. So you can also consider this is the conversion from enum to string. Clear? Yes or no?
Okay, sir.
Right. So concurrency token we have already discussed, right? There are two ways to implement concurrency. There are two ways to handle concurrency. What are the two ways? First of all, you can create a white array property, and you can decorate that white array property with a timestamp attribute. That is one way. Another way, you can also apply the right concurrency attribute right on the properties which you want to make as part of your right concurrency control. The same thing is also available here. Here you can use this each row version property, right? You can call this each row version method on a property, and this property should be binary. That means so what the timestamp attribute is doing. Right, the same thing is going to be done by this each row version function. So, but in this case, this row version property should be a byte array, and on this byte array property, I can apply this each row version, and only one time I can apply. And then this property, right, whatever it is going to be created, this will be right coming to picture to handle the concurrency in your application. Clear? The same thing, right? Whatever the timestamp attribute is doing, the same thing is going to be done by this each row version method. Clear?
Yes.
Right? Alternative way means, right, I don't want to create any additional column, right? Rather than I want to manage the data based on my existing column. So in that case, what I need to do, right, you can apply this is concurrency token method on the property on which, right, which based on which you want to manage the, right, what I can say, concurrency control, right? The same way what we discussed with the concurrency attribute, that is nothing but this is concurrency token. So in this case, it can only be applied to a single property of type byte array, and this is concurrency token. It can be applied to any kind of a properties and any number of things. Clear? Clear or not?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
sir.
Right? The same thing, right? Configuring shadow properties means what? Now, these properties are not part of our model classes, but they are going to be created in the database. And these properties are basically used for tracking purpose, auditing purpose, right? For example, right, you want to store created date, modified date, created by, modified by, right, some kind of values. And for which you don't want to, right, and you don't want those properties to be created, right, as part of your model. Then in that case, what you can do is you can create these properties as a shadow properties. How you can do this, right? So for this purpose, you have to use this property and whatever the property name and what is the data type and what is the default value, that what you need to specify. In this case, what will happen, like in the product entity, there's no property called in the product entity, there's no property called a created date. But in the products database table, it is going to be created, this created data as a column of this data type, and whatever the value we are provided here, that value is going to be stored inside that column. Clear? So shadow properties, basically you can consider these are the properties which are not defined in the entity class, but are part of the entity framework or model, and they are also mapped to the database columns. Clear? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So value configuring value generation, for example, if you want to generate some value generate on add, value generate on add or update, right? So there are two methods, and how you are going to manage those value, that what you can set, right? For example, if you want to create some identity column, right, using Fluent API, then this is the option. So in this case, whenever it is going to create a new entity, right, this column is going to generate the value automatically, right? So this is going to be, you can consider, this is the way you can define the identity column. Clear?
Yes.
Right? So automatically this is going to generate the value when you are adding a new customer entity. Similarly, if you want to ignore properties, then what you need to do, you just need to call the ignore method, and whichever the property you don't want to create as a database column, that property name you need to specify. So ignore means it is going to ignore this column, right? Ignore this property when the database is created. So there will not be any column with this name in the database. Clear?
So
Sir,
this is
ignore means it will
equivalent to
delete.
not mapped. Not
Sorry?
mapped. Is this
Sorry?
equal to not mapped?
Obviously, this is similar to not map. So whatever the not mapped is doing the same thing. That is the reason why I'm not giving any right importance to this right configuration, because we have already discussed this thing, right, using data annotation. We have already, so whatever I'm discussing here, everything is possible. So we have already discussed how to make the primary, right, how to create a column with identity. Am I discussed database generated attribute we have discussed? Yes or no? Guys, yes or no? So everything, right?
Yes.
Concurrency token means that a concurrency attribute. Row version means that timestamp attribute, right? This is not possible using, right, what I can say, data annotation. Computed column, this is, you can only declare that computed column, but how the column value is going to be calculated, that what you need to specify here. So we have already discussed how to specify the column data type size and all these things. Max length, min length attribute are there, right? So required means you can apply the required attribute, right? So this is the reason why I'm not giving more right emphasis on the explanation part, right? I'm just showing you the syntax because we have already discussed this explanation, right, many times prior to this session. Am I right? And
Yes.
and right, and doesn't make any
Yes.
sense to right discuss the same concept again and again, rather than we need to right discuss something new, something interesting. So now let us see one example and try to understand all this concept right one by one. So first of all, let me go ahead and create the order status enum. So this is my order status. The same order status enum I'm using here. And this is going to my customer entity. So let me go ahead, create the customer entity. So here you can see this is going to my ID. And here it is first name, last name, email, phone number, last login date, created date, and order. So these are the data type, and you can see uh, different types of data type I have defined here. So next one, see here we are don't, I'm not discussing anything here because the configuration, every configuration we are going to do using Fluent API. So whenever I'm going to configure Fluent API, at that time I'm going to discuss what exactly we are configuring. So this is my product entity. So here also product ID, name, price, description, and here you can see this is the row version property. And on this row version property, I can apply the is row version function. Next one, what I'm going to create is order entity. Go to the order entity. So this is also going to be very simple and straightforward. Order ID, order date, order status. This is one enum, right? So whatever the enum I have created, that order status enum I have created here, created date. Again, on this column, we are also having this row version property. This is going to be used for concurrency token. Customer ID foreign key. This is the navigation property, and one order can have multiple order items, right? The same. So this example we have already, right? This entities we have already created many times, so no need to discuss what is the relationship between the entities, right? So which you already know very well. So this is my order item ID, which is going to be the primary key, unit price, quantity, the total price we will calculate right using computed column. Order ID, this is the foreign key. Order is the navigation property. Product ID is the foreign key, and product is the right navigation property. Next, what we need to do, we need to configure the DP context class, and inside this DP context class, right, we need to configure the property, right, config settings. So let me go ahead and configure the class. First of all, you can see I have applied the customers, product, orders, and order items division properties. So these are the properties which I have applied to these entities, right? Customer, product, orders, and order items. So next what I'm going to do, I'm going to set the customer entity. So you can see has column name. So we have already discussed what is this. Now you guys are going to explain me. So in this case, what should be the column name in the database for the first name property?
First underscore name.
And what should be the maximum, what should be the data type in the database for this first name with size? What should be the data type and what is its size?
And we are care 100.
In worker of 100. And is this
100.
email ID is going to be a not null column?
Not null. Not null. Because it is required.
Is required. If I pass false here, then what will happen? It is going to be
It will be null. Nullable.
it's a created date. What should be the default value?
Get
In
date.
SQL, get current date in SQL.
In both the cases, I mean, if I'm using SQL means it can be
Yeah.
applicable to
Yes.
both,
Application also.
right? So then this property ID means value generated on add means it is going to be my identity column.
Identity. Identity.
And the phone number, it is going to be required or optional?
Nullable. Optional.
Optional means it is not, null can be accepted, right? Product entity. So what
Yes.
should be the product name column in the database?
Product name.
So it is going to be product name. And what should be the this price column data type in the database? It is going to be
18.2 decimal.
And this property description, is it going to be created as a column in the database?
No.
Ignore.
It
It will
ignore
not
means
create
it
it.
is not going to be created, right? So guys, everybody participate. See, already we have discussed these things, right, many times. Now you are not fresher into, right, what I can say entity framework. So you should say, right, and you should decide what to do, how to do, and when to do, right? And this row version column, is it going to be created as a timestamp?
Yes.
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 Whatever the
Yes.
timestamp attribute is doing, that is what it is going to do in the data. So this row version column is going to be used in the where clause, right? Whenever we are updating and deleting the data in a multi-user environment, or you can say whenever the same data is accessed by multiple user or transaction, to handle the concurrency, this column will be used as part of your where clause condition. And again, this is going to be my default value created date. It is going to be created with this default value. Clear?
Yes, sir.
The status, right? If you look at this order column status, this is an enum. By default, enum means it is integer. Now I'm specifying has conversion string. Means what? The status column is going to be created as a string data type rather than integer, and whatever the named right constant means this pending processing right completed. These values are going to be stored in the database rather than the integer behind, right? The integer values like 0, 1, 2. So 0 and 2 are not going to be stored. Whatever the named constant, they are going to be stored as it is in the database. Again, this is I'm specifying the default value is going to be stored in the database. Again, in this case, order status, right? By default, what is the order status? It is going to be pending. So why I'm setting here has default value? Because in this case, this pending I'm going to send from my application. This pending I'm going to send from my application. And whenever you are entering any data manually in the database, whatever the status you want, you can set. But whenever the data is going from my application, by default, the status is going to pending. Why? Because I have not used SQL function. And again, this row version, it is going to be a row version property, which is also going to manage the concurrency for the order entity. Order item, you can see unit price. I have specified the precision and scale as 18,2. Total price also, I have specified the value as 18,2. And this total price, right, I have used as a calculated, or you can say as a computed column. And this column value is going to be computed on the right database side, you can say, which is the value, whatever the unit price multiplied by quantity. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Sir, one question for row level concurrency check in our entity class. Is it we have to always give the name as row version?
No, so that is what you understood, right? In our times, right? Whenever you discuss concurrency, you can give any name. So this is
Any
just
name, right? Because yeah. Mm,
you can give any name, no issue. But for the,
yes.
as it is maintaining a unique version for that particular row, so we are providing the name as row version. You can
Row
give
version.
any name, right? Clear, guys? Any confusion related to the settings what we have done here? Is that clear,
No, sir.
everybody?
No. Yes.
Okay. Right. Next, what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to generate the migration and show you all these things, right? So rather than this, what I'm going to do, I'm directly going to without generating the migration, I'm going to show you the operations, right? So I'm not going to generate any kind of a migration. Is there any other approach which can do the same thing for me? Guys, tell me. Without generating migration, can I create the database? Can I delete the
Ensure,
database?
ensure
Yes.
created, ensure
Yes,
deleted.
yes, yes.
So what I need to do, I need to use first of all context, right? Context dot database dot ensure deleted. First of all, please make sure the database is deleted. Then what I need to do, then I need to make sure the database is then created. Not update context dot database dot ensure created. Right? Where is that method ensure created? So if you want to use asynchronous version, that is fine, but asynchronous version you need to use inside a particular, right? So that's fine. So in this case, first it will delete the database if it exists, and then it is going to create the database if it doesn't exist. So here you can see I have created 4 methods. One method is going to create the products, another one going to create the customer, another one is going to create orders with order items, and another method is going to display all the orders. Right? Now, now you guys are going to tell me, right? So in this case, context dot products dot any. So what exactly it means? So instead, right, what people are generally doing, let me give you variable products equals to what exactly people are doing. Let me give you products dot list, and then what they are generally doing if products dot count is greater than 0, then right people are generally writing this kind of code. So what is the difference between these two statements? Guys, tell me. What is the
So
difference
here,
between statements?
Above is
The
returning count and below is returning Boolean value.
So that is
no,
what I'm
no,
not
the
asking.
first
So
Two
what is my
two
requirement?
lines will take more time.
Two
Two
times.
lines of
Yeah.
execution.
So that is
no,
what you
the
understand.
line number
Then-
34
right.
first select all the products.
Okay. If you are thinking that lines takes more time, then what I can do is I can do like this. That is also fine. So now you just tell me, what is the difference? Is there any 2 lines of code anymore?
so here it is checking only the count in the first line, and second line it will be checking the products. What are the products? The same products it will be there. It will not.
What is the difference
Count
between
means like, sir, it will go from start to end because it has to do the counting. Any means if it, whether if it will find the
Yeah.
first
End of
product
first. Yeah.
itself, it
Yes,
will return true.
That's
yes,
correct. Yeah. That's correct.
that?
yeah, yeah.
But for this particular scenario, which one is the preferred approach?
Second one,
Second one.
Yeah.
Second one. Why second one?
because it
It
don't
will
have to
take less
scan.
time.
Yeah.
So definitely, this is the preferred approach.
yeah.
What people, right, those who are having less experience, they are doing this thing. But this is going to kill your application performance. So what is my requirement? My requirement is to check, is there any record in the table? So if my requirement is to check, is there any record in the table? So what I can do is, I can just go ahead and check any first record is there. Yes, first record is there. From there only I need to return. I do not need to scan all the data. But in this case, what is happening? Not only it is going to fetch all the data from the data. So in this case, it is fetching all the records from the database table or not. So here it is going to return a Boolean value, whether record is there or not. And that is too by checking the first record. It is scan the record, first record is found. So from there on it will return. Only one scanning is there. So in this case, it is going to scan the complete database table. Definitely, if I'm checking one record and if I'm checking right 1,000 record, definitely 1,000 record is going to take more time or less time?
More time.
Or
More time. More time. Second option. So in this case, from the database server, it is returning a single Boolean value to my application. But in this case, what exactly it is returning from database to our application? The list of a data. So that means I am returning a
of data.
single Boolean value and I am returning 1,000 records, and each record is having multiple columns. Then which one is more size? The first approach is going to take more size. So more data means more time
Yes.
or less time?
More time.
In which they are saying Mandire gote katha achi. Right? So, right, little bit serious, guys, right? So we are discussing something important. So in this case, right, what I can say, uh, this statement is going to definitely give you better performance comparing with this statement. So if your intent, right, if your requirement is to check whether any data is available or not, always use any or any async method rather than using this right count method. Clear?
Okay.
Clear or not? So these are the small things, but it will make a huge impact in your application performance. Why it is going to take, so why this statement taking less time and why it is taking more time? Is that clear or not?
Clear.
Yes, sir.
In this case, it is going to scan the complete database table. It is going to return the complete data from database to my
Yes.
application. This is going to be taking more time. So in this case, it is only going to scan a single record and it is going to return only a single scalar value. So definitely less scan and less data means it will give you better performance. Clear? So these are the questions,
Yes,
right?
sir.
You might get in the right interview, right? I generally not ask any difficult kind of question. This kind of simple question I ask in the interview. If this is the scenario, which one is going to give better performance? Definitely, people are going to tell yes, any method is going to give better performance. My question is, I know any method is going to give better performance, but why? That is what you need to explain. Right? So if they are asking, don't say ki any method is going to give better performance, don't stop the answer from there. Also explain why it is going to give better performance. Right? So that the interviewer who is taking the interview, then he will feel that yes, that Sudha is doing something right in depth. So now what I'm doing here, I'm creating this object, right? List of products, adding that products each an array. So I'm using add range method and adding that products to this products division properties and calling the set changes. So in this case, what it will do, if there is no record in the database, it is going to add this record to the database, right? The same thing I'm doing here. I'm checking if any customer are there, then don't create any new customer, otherwise create the customer. So here you can see I'm creating two customers data, adding this customer to the customers collection, and then calling the set changes method. So this is again, I'm creating order. So first of all, you can see order, right? I'm checking if any order are there. So I'm not going to create. Otherwise, what I'm doing here, I'm fetching the data right based on the email ID. So instead of email ID, you can use find method or whatever right approach you can use. So here, what I'm saying, this is my customer one, this is my customer two. I'm fetching two product, laptop and smartphone. And then by taking this customer one, customer two, and this product, laptop and right, a smartphone, I'm creating two orders. So one order you can see for customer ID one, order date is this one, order status right, I'm not sending here. By default, it is going to be pending, and these are my order items. And the second order, it is only having one order item, right? So these are the data. Then I'm calling this add range method, and it is going to add to the database. Now, in this case, right, guys, remember, this display order. So you just tell me whatever query I have written, is it performance optimized or not?
Yes.
Guys, tell me, is this code, whatever I have written, is this performance optimized or there is a scope to improve the performance?
I think it is optimized.
Optimized. Are you sure?
Yes.
Let's see, if you are getting
Yes,
this
sir, it is
kind of code,
optimized.
right? If see, suppose someone asks you this thing. And he provided this is my display order, and here I'm fetching the data and I'm displaying the data in this manner. So can you please tell me whether this code is optimized or not, or is there any scope to improve the performance? Then what will you say? What will be your answer?
I might say it might be optimized using as no tracking.
Obviously, you have to use as no tracking. Why? Because in this case, you guys remember when I need to track the entity. So in this case, if I'm using context.customer, so all the customers, their orders, their order items, their product, every object is going to be tracked by entity framework core. Every object is going to be tracked by this context object. But tracking is required, right? When we need to use tracking, when we are going to add, update, or delete data from the database, at that time we need to track the entities. But in this example, am I going to do any kind of insert, update, and delete operations? Guys,
No,
tell
you're
me.
only getting,
Doing any kind
only
of
getting.
TML operations? If I'm not
No.
doing any kind of a TML operation, then why I'm going to give a burden to my context object by tracking this unnecessary object? It is only for displaying purpose, reporting purpose, viewing purpose. So there is no DML operation means, guys, remember, always make use of this as no tracking method. Clear? So this as no tracking, what exactly it is going to do? It is explicitly tell the context object, hey, context object, please return the data from the database, but don't track them. But don't track them. So once this data is returned, right, if you are using as no tracking, if you do any kind of update, delete, right, any modification, and if you call the set changes method, nothing is going to be happen because these entities are not tracked by the context object. So if you are not doing any kind of update, insert, and delete operation, then not required to track them. You can use as no tracking because see, guys, remember, nothing is free. If I'm giving you some task that please track that guy, what he is doing in their day-to-day activities, then your focus will be on him. You need to track where he is going, what he is eating, what he is doing, right? Everything you need to track. That means you are giving your time to him. But if I'm saying don't track him, then you are free. So free means whatever other task you can also do. So the same thing is also applicable here. If it is tracking means it is going to take some time. For tracking, see, nothing is free in this one. If it's tracking the entities means for tracking, it is using some kind of a resources internally. If it is, if we free those resources, it means these resources like going to be utilized by some other operations. That is what right we will get if we are using this as no tracking for better performance, right? So and here what I'm doing, I'm simply looping through all the orders and in each customer and for each customer how many orders are there and for each order how many order items are there and that total cost is also I'm going to display in the below. So this is what my application code looks like. So now let me run the application and see whether it is working fine or not. Okay. Now you can see it is working as expected. Clear or no? Clear or not?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. Now, if someone asks you what is the difference between count product list dot count and any method, when to use any method and when to use count method is not required. Yes, you can use count method if already you have fetched the data. Right? For example, not only you are going to check whether data is available or not, but also if you need those data here, only you need to use count method. But if my requirement is only to check the data, then in that case, best option is any. And second thing, right, if they are asking, suppose going to use no tracking. As no tracking means they will ask this question in the interview. If I'm retrieving some entities, right, from the database, then how will decide whether I need to use as no tracking or not? To what scenario I need to use as no tracking option or not. So you have to tell if I'm going to perform some kind of a update, insert, and a delete operation on the entities what is being written by the context object, then in that scenario I should not use as no tracking because if I'm using as no tracking means the content, right? The context object is not going to track those entities. But if I'm going to perform the DML operations, then definitely I should not use as no tracking. So if I'm not tracking, if my intention is read only, If my intention is to read the data and display the data, that's it. Then in that case, I should use as no tracking. Clear?
Sir, one thing, sir, in DML operation, suppose I'm not using no tracking method. Actually, what exactly tracking when we are performing the DML operation?
So what do you mean by tracking? You want to understand, right?
Yes, correct. What exactly what happened in tracking?
No, that is what I'm saying. Did you attend the session from the beginning?
No, sir.
Then just go ahead and watch because I have already explained
Okay.
this thing. So what do you mean by right? It is going to create some kind of a right. What exactly, guys? Can anybody explain? What do you mean by tracking? How it is being handled by entity framework code? It is going to create a snapshot of the original data. And whenever you are doing some changes, right, it is going to compare that changes with the snapshot, what is available in the context of this, and accordingly, it is going to right, generate the update, insert, and the delete state. To understand this tracking, you need to understand what do you mean by entity state, what are the different entity states, right? How the entity state, based on the entity state, how the DML right, insert of the statements are generated. What do you mean by snapshot? When this snapshot is created, what exactly this snapshot is going to store, right? So these things you need to understand, which we have already discussed from the beginning, right? Just go ahead and watch those sessions, right? Because
Yes.
right, without those things, right, you will not understand this concept. Clear?
Okay.
Anyone having any more question, guys? Guys, give me 1 minute. Clear, guys? This example is clear? Clear or not? And guys,
Okay,
see,
okay, sir.
this kind of a complex, right, LNQ queries you need to write. So until and unless you are not right fetching the data from multiple tables, how the data is being fetched, right? How it is generating the right SQL statement using inner join, left join, outer join, right? Those things you need to understand. Yes. Clear? This is clear.
Yeah.
So next, what we need to do, we need to discuss one interesting thing, right? So one interesting things means, right? So as I have already told you, right? Few people also asked from the beginning, sir, can we create a table without using primary key in entity framework code? See, if you are right, this is not possible without Fluent API. If you are using Fluent API, it is possible. By default, it is not possible to create a table without primary key. But in certain scenarios, right, we might require, right? We might require means in relational database, guys, remember, every table is recommended to have a primary key to uniquely identify each record. But however, there are certain scenarios, right, where we might consider creating tables without creating any primary keys. For example, if I'm going to store the log data or auditing data, right? So, for example, I don't want to, I'm not storing the data on my, what I can say, uh, text file rather than I want to store the log data into a database table. So if I'm storing the log data into the database table, then inside that table, I don't require any kind of primary key, not required. So that table I can create without primary key. Suppose you want to store some historical data, right? Some historical data means where each row is unique based on its timestamp. For example, there are some historical data is there, and based on the current date and the time, that is going to uniquely identify. Or you can say there is no particular column or combinations. There are any right as a reference, or you can say serve as a primary key. For example, you can consider legacy database. If any legacy database is there, where there is no primary key, so we can't tell anything, right? Suppose my requirement is just to go ahead and right, what I can say, store the data. Suppose someone sending some Excel file, and that Excel file doesn't maintain any uniqueness. There is nothing called right uniqueness which we can identify each record. So what is my requirement? Just whatever you got, just to store them in the database. Don't check any kind of a right, what I can say, right, validation, any kind of a uniqueness. Then in that case, right, to store those data, we can create a table without primary key, right? So That is what you need to remember. So for some time, right? But nowadays, all the time, right? Whenever we are working with the relational databases, most of the time, 99.99% of time, you will find the primary key. But yes, there are some scenarios where you might consider creating a table without primary key. So how to create a table without primary key? So first of all, guys, remember, right? What we need to do. So we need to create a table without a primary key means it is a two-step process. First of all, you should not define any ID or name, entity name plus ID column. So there should not be any right ID or entity name plus ID column. Why? Because if you provide ID or entity name plus ID in the entity, then by default it is going to be your primary key. Second thing, you should not apply the key attribute to any of your property. If you apply the key attribute to any of your property, then that property is going to be a primary key. Clear or not? This is the default convention. By default, ID plus entity name plus ID. If this default convention you are not following, then you can also define a property with the key attribute that is going to be a, right, what I can say, primary, that is going to be the primary key in the database table. This is what we have already discussed or not? Guys, tell me.
Yes, sir.
Right now what I need to do is, right, I don't want to, so what, first of all, in step one, what I need to do, you should not define any column which is following this naming convention, and you should not apply this key attribute on any of your properties. Second option, what you need to do, on this on model creating method, what Fluent API method I need to use, I need to use has no key method. Has no key method, and that's it. So once you apply the has no key method, it will tell the entity framework, hey, Mr. Entity Framework. So I'm telling you, don't look for the primary key for this particular entity. Create the table without using primary key. I'm giving you instruction. So this has no key, it is having that much of power. He will tell Entity Framework code not to look for the primary key on that particular entity. So let us understand this with an example, right? For example, we are going to store the application log inside a right table. So let me first create a table where we are going to store the application log data. So this is my class application log.cs, and right, and this is my entity. So here you can see what I'm showing when the log is happening, time of the log entry, what is the log label like information, warning or error, whatever the log message, that is what I'm going to store. So currently, if you look at this, there is no ID column, there is no application log ID column, and I have not applied the key attribute to any of these properties. Clear or not? Clear or not? By default,
Yes, sir.
is it going to create a primary key with these changes?
No.
With this configuration,
No,
there
no.
is no column are available, or we have not applied any data annotation which will mark any property as the primary key, right? So that is the first thing. Okay, so before that, let me delete this thing, because right, I need to generate the migration and all these things. Okay. Right. Second thing is what I need to do. I need to configure the same thing, right? So what I need to do. Okay. Let me remove these things. Okay, guys, tell me how to configure a entity. Model builder dot entity method. So to this entity method, what I need, application log, whatever the entity name I need to pass.
Entity name.
Has no
And
key.
pass
No key.
no key method. So that's it. So this will mark the, right, what I can say, entity name, right, or you can say this will mark the table name, or you can say this entity is going to be created with a table, right, without having the primary key. Now what I can do is I can also specify a different table name, right? So for example, in the database, so I want to create a table with the name application log. So what I'm doing here, so I'm configuring this two table log. So basically here I'm specifying. So this is going to be created, this entity is going to be created as a table with the name logs. Next, what I need to do, I need to specify this log property, application logs, right? Whatever the property name I provided, yes, application logs. That's what I have provided here. Clear? So in this case, the property name is application log. the entities application log, but the table name in the database, it is going to be created with the name log. Clear or not?
No. Yes, sir.
Right? So that's it. So what should be the database in this case? I need to provide EF core DB. Let me give you a database. The database name is going to be EF core DB. Is that clear? So what are the changes I need to do?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Right.
DB
So
context.
that's it. Right. So now let us try to generate the migration file and see whether it is working fine or not. So is there any EF code DB? No. So let me generate the migration file. Now open the database. So table name is logs, yes. And you can see there is no PK. PK means primary key.
Primary key.
You can see log at log level message. There is no primary key. Is that clear?
Yes. Yes,
Right.
sir.
Now the important thing you will have to remember, and one more thing is, see guys, remember, entity framework can only track those entities which are having the primary key. Entity framework only track those entities which are having the primary key. If the entity doesn't have any primary key, means entity framework cannot track such entities. Now, then you just tell me in this case, right? Does this application log entity have any primary key?
No.
No.
So
No.
if there is no primary key, then just tell me, is entity framework going to track these entities? So no tracking.
Actually,
No.
no.
No tracking. Why no tracking? No tracking because of no
No
primary
primary.
key.
No primary key.
Because of no primary key.
Primary
Clear
key.
or clear or
Yes, sir.
not? Right.
Hmm.
If the entity framework doesn't track the entities, means what? He cannot decide whether the entity state is added state, modified state, and a deleted state. So what exactly it means? It means
do any
no, no DML operations using the context object. So no DML operation using the context object. But you can retrieve the data. And you can retrieve the data. You can retrieve data, but this data is going to be by default as no tracking. Clear?
Okay.
So if the table doesn't have any primary key, means what? Means entity framework cannot track that table or entity. If the entity framework not tracking that entity, means we cannot perform any DML. DML means what? Insert, update, and delete operations. Select is not a DML part. Select is a data retrieval DRL part. So in this case, he cannot perform insert, update, and delete operation using the context object, but he can retrieve the data. Why? Because whenever we are retrieving the data, we have two options: whether we want the data to be tracked by the context object, or we can also take that these data should not be tracked by the context object, right? And in that case, right, if we are retrieving some data using the context object, and if the data what we are retrieving, if that data doesn't have any primary key, then by default that is as no tracking. Means what? Whatever the data the context object returning only for the read only purpose. Read only purpose means we can only read the data. So once you retrieve the data, you cannot do anything else. You cannot modify, you cannot delete, you can't do anything. Then the question is here, how to perform the DML operations? Right? So the question is how to perform the DML operations on keyless entity. Getting my point or not? So in
Yes,
this
sir.
case, what I need to do, I need to write plain SQL statement or storage procedure. Plain SQL statement or storage procedure you need to write. And this entity framework core and entity framework core also supports also supports the execution of raw SQL statement, or you can say plain SQL statement and storage procedure. Right? Clear or not? So what I need to do, I need to write raw SQL, or you can say play raw SQL statement, or you can create some kind of a storage procedure. And if you are executing those raw SQL statements, that's fine. If you are creating storage procedure, that storage procedure you need to call from our application using the entity framework core. ADO.NET core is fine, but here also using entity framework core, we can also execute raw SQL statement, and we can also execute some kind of a storage procedure. Let us see how we can do this. Clear, guys? Clear or
Yes, sir.
right? So let
Yes,
us
sir.
see how we can do. Yes. Anyone having any question? Okay. Let me go ahead and show you this thing, right? So this is my entity framework core context object. Now you can see. Sorry, I have placed it in the wrong. So ensure database they created, deleted. This is not required because we have already generated the migration file, which is creating the database. Now you can see context dot database dot execute SQL raw. So this execute SQL raw allows us to execute some raw SQL statement. How to consume the storage procedure, we'll discuss right in our coming session. But for now, any SQL statement you want to execute, that what you can execute using execute SQL raw method. So here you can see insert into log, whatever the log at log label and message, right? This logs table expecting values. I have provided some hard-coded value, or you can provide any value. Logging, see, whenever we are implementing logging, most of the time these are going to be some kind of hard-coded value or some kind of a right, what I can say variable. If you're having variable, you can also use them here. So here I'm providing some hard-coded value. So this is the insert statement, right? Or you can say raw SQL statement that is going to be executed, right, when the statement is executed. And here you can see what I'm doing. Context dot application start to list async dot result. So for now, okay, don't use this asynchronous version because we have not yet discussed right asynchronous programming. But as I already told you, whenever I'm going to discuss some new concept, that new concept introduction I'm going to give you in the previous concept. So let me put this one. Raw to list async means in a asynchronous manner, it is going to execute the query, and this result method will return the data, and that data it is going to store here. So here what I'm doing, so whatever log I have stored in the database, and here you can see using this context dot database, I'm not using add, update, write anything. Executing plain SQL statement is possible. And here, but in this case, I'm retrieving the data. Using the context of data, I can retrieve the data. But in this case, by default, it is going to make use of a as no tracking. Clear? Yes or no?
Yeah, yes, sir. Dot result, why we are using here?
Yeah, you just tell me why I'm using dot result. If I'm going to use here, await, it will not work. Why I'm using dot result? Can anybody tell me? It is working. Why? Because it is a asynchronous method. Okay, let's put this as why. So in this case, it is not working. Why? So basically, if you are using this await keyword, then this call should be inside a static method. Sorry, inside a asynchronous method. If it is not
Right,
inside a asynchronous method, you cannot use await keyword. If you
right,
are not
right.
await keyword, then what you need to do? You need to call this result
Okay,
to get the result.
okay.
In a synchronous block, if you are calling one asynchronous method, call this result method so that it will wait till the method execution completed, and the result it is going to store here, right? If it is a synchronous block, for example, static, I'm making this a static async. So async means what? What I can do here, I can make use of this await keyword, right? So await keyword, and once I use the await keyword, I can remove this thing. That's fine. Clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Right? So here I'm displaying all the logs. And now if you want to update the SQL statement, you can write the plain update SQL statement. If you want to delete some kind of a logs, you can also write the delete SQL statement. using the same right method, and here do not need to call the self generation and nothing because they are not going to be work, right? And after the update and the delete SQL statement, again I'm fetching the data from the database, and here you can use await or the result, that's fine. And this log data, whatever it return, right, I'm going to display here. So let me run the application and see whether it is displaying the data. So there is some issue, there is some error. What is the error? So program doesn't contain a static main method suitable for the entry. So in this case, he is saying that this program doesn't contain a static main method suitable for an entry point. So means there is some issue with the static method. So what is the issue? Let us try to observe.
But I guess that issue is with the different file,
Different file. This
EF
is the
core
issue.
context, EF core.
What is? So this is not the issue. So that async keyword, what I have written, that is the issue. Okay. So I have to use this result. Clear? So with these changes, now run the application. Clear? So this is the application log. Then we have updated a few log and we have deleted the log. Clear, guys? Now in this table, it is managing the data, but without using any kind of a primary key. So this is one of the real-time scenario where you can consider creating a table without using primary key. Clear, guys?
Okay, sir.
So does entity framework core track non-primary key entities? No. Entity framework cannot track those entities which doesn't have any key entities, right? Performing database operations on a non-primary key table means you can use raw SQL statement, which I have shown you. How to use storage procedure in our coming session, I will show you. Because till now we have not discussed, right, how to consume storage procedure using entity framework core. And definitely, right, after a few sessions, I'm going to also discuss how to consume storage procedure, storage function, right, views from our application. That is what also possible. Clear? And if you are using right in non key list table, then if you cannot use add, update, and a remove method because these are not tracked by the right context object because there is no primary key. Clear, guys? Yes or no?
That is
Yes
clear.
or
It's clear. Yeah.
no? Now, as I have already given you the introduction, in the next topic, what we are going to discuss is asynchronous programming. Any question, guys, till now?
No, sir.
So, why asynchronous programming? Can anybody tell me? Why asynchronous programming? Guys, tell me why asynchronous
I
programming?
think
If certain tasks we want to run together
in the background,
asynchronously.
As
Yes.
per my knowledge, it will not block a thread. If a
Correct?
thread is blocked, it will not block a thread, means not block a task. If it suppose we have two methods, inserting and selecting. If the control goes to the inserting, at the time the thread is blocked, and the if you are using asynchronous, then it will come to the select block.
That is not partially correct, but that is not correct, right? So
For any
basically,
kind of yeah.
right, whenever you are performing IO bound operation,
I operation.
right? So whenever you are performing some IO bound operations, which are also called as time consuming operations. Clear? So whenever you are performing some kind of IO bound operations, which you can consider as time consuming operation, then in that scenario, you can consider using asynchronous programming. Then the question that would comes to your mind is, sir, what do you mean by IO bound? So we can understand the time consuming operation means that operation taking more time to complete it. So what do you mean by this IO bound operations? So IO bound operation means the operation which involve input output, right? For example, database query. Suppose you want to execute some, right? Want to execute some database query. So database query execution. Right? So database query execution, performing some file input output operations, file IO operations, right? Calling some external APIs, right? Calling some
API
external
call.
APIs, right? So these are nothing but some kind of, right, what I can say, IO bound operations. IO bound operation means from your application to execute or to perform the operation, it is going to a different application. For example, you just tell me, if I'm creating one method, suppose I'm creating one method, and if that method is taking more time, then what I can do is I can think about how to improve this method or not. So if it is taking time, then I can optimize this one. If it is taking time, taking more time, then I can think how to optimize this method. But in this case, suppose you are consuming some kind of API, external API. If that API is taking more time, can you optimize that API from your application?
No.
Right?
We do not
So,
have hold on it.
sorry?
We do not have hold for that one.
No, you can
It
optimize.
is an external API, so we
Yeah,
can't
that is external
optimize it.
API. Na? So the
You
code
have
is
no
not,
influence on it.
we are only calling the API. We are executing the data. So they are created the storage procedure. We are simply calling the storage procedure. If that storage procedure taking more time, that storage procedure I cannot optimize from my application. For that purpose, we have got the person responsible for designing the storage procedure, for designing the API. They have to take the responsibility how to optimize the query or performance, right? That is not in our hand. So what is in our hand? So in this case, right, whenever I'm executing one method, right, by default, right, the code is going to be by default, the code is going to be executed by one thread. By default, the code is going to be executed by the main thread, executed by a thread. And generally we call this thread as a main thread, right? So main thread. So this is the thread which is responsible for executing your application code. Now, so this main thread is executing. So when the main thread is executing, it is making some database query. So it is making some database query, and this query, let assume, takes some 10 seconds of time, some 10 seconds of time. So until and unless, right, this execution is not completed, this thread is blocked or not?
Yep, it's blocked.
Yes.
Right? So this is what I'm talking about, the synchronous way. So until and unless your method execution, this database query execution is not completed, and I have not received the data from the database, the main thread which is executing my application code. So any thread. So whichever the thread executing my application code, let's say some thread, right? Let instead of saying main thread, let's say some thread is executing my application code. That means these 10 seconds, my thread blocked or not. So that means this 10 seconds, what I'm saying here, some thread is blocked. Blocked for how many seconds? 10 seconds or not,
10 seconds, yeah.
right? So that means this resource I'm utilizing or properly or unutilizing. So this some thread what is executing my application code. Why I need to make that thread blocked? Why it is blocked? Because of this synchronous nature. That means the same thread cannot do anything else. Let assume your application having some 1,000 threads, right? That means maximum 1,000 threads are there. And in this scenario, so in this particular scenario, if at a time 1,000 requests are coming, then after the 1,000 requests, then the next request they have to wait for 10 seconds. Yes or no? Because all threads are
Yes.
blocked. Let assume 1,000 requests come. That means what? Now those 1,000 requests are going to be executed by one thread. So after the 1,000 request, whenever the new request come, right, that new request is going to be wait for 10 seconds.
10 seconds.
They have to wait for 10 seconds. Why? But then
Because of
why?
synchronous.
Because there is no available thread, and each thread is blocked, and once they available, they can handle the new request. So in this case, this user who is sending the request, they have to wait a long time to get the response or not.
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Right? If they are not getting the response in within few seconds or milliseconds, if they have to wait for a longer period of time to get the response, then the user experience, right, is going to be good or bad?
Bad.
They will go to another website.
Definitely, it is going to be very bad. So to overcome this problem, right, what I can do is I can go with a asynchronous program. I can go with a asynchronous programming. So with asynchronous programming, what will happen, right? Let us try to observe, right? So asynchronous programming, by default, the code is going to be going to be executed by a thread. That is fine. By default, the code is going to be executed by a thread. Let's say some thread. So once this is executed, right? What I'm doing, I'm sending some asynchronous database query. I'm sending some async database query execution, which is going to take 10 seconds. So I'm sending some execution code, which is going to take some 10 seconds. Then what exactly happening? So in this case, the thread is not going to be blocked. Some thread is not blocked. The some thread is not blocked. Rather than this is some thread is going to be released. So once it is released, immediately, right, immediately this thread going to handle another request. So now let's assume this 100 request comes, then 100 requests are started executing, but as soon as they make the database call, they are also released. That means the same 1,000 requests, they can handle another 1,000, right, this same 1,000 threads, they can handle another 1,000 requests. That means in this case, does the user have to wait a longer period of time?
No.
No. Why?
Sorry, what did
Because
you say about 1,000 threads? Sorry, I didn't get the last one. 1,000 threads, 1,000 requests. What did you say, please?
so if my application have available 1,000 threads, then each thread is going to handle one request, then maximum 100 requests are going to be handled, yes or no,
Yep.
at a time.
Yep.
But once this 1,000 requests are executing this statement, so does this 1,000 requests blocked for 10 seconds or they are released immediately?
No, they are blocked.
They are blocked or released?
Released.
For async, they are released. If it's the
In
sync,
asynchronous.
release,
Async.
yeah.
It is
If
released.
they are released means what? They are available to take some new request or not?
Yes.
Poo.
So
Yes,
now,
And
if
they
any
definitely.
new request comes, now if any new request comes, they have to wait 10 seconds or immediately that request is going to be handled by one of the available thread
immediately. And
Immediate.
immediately. That means the user experience is going to be good or bad,
Good.
good. Good.
right? So that is what the use of asynchronous programming. The thread is never going to be blocked. Good user experience, right? Proper utilization of CPU resources, right? Thread are going to be optimized. So that is the benefit of using asynchronous programming. Clear?
The threads are released back into the pool, into the thread pools.
So yes, see, whenever the request is received, one of the thread from the thread pool is going to handle the request. And once the it start executing the database, right? Once it call the external API file or right database query, that thread will be released. Released means it will be again go back to the right thread pool, and whenever a new request come, again the same thread or a different thread, right? Whichever thread is available, they can handle the new request. Clear?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank
So,
you.
sir, who will then which thread will handle my asynchronous database query execution, which is going for the 10 seconds?
So in this case, why you should handle? So the
So
query
that is
execution.
running in the background.
The background means a thing, see what? You
Oh,
are
okay, that is
sending
IO operation. Okay, external system.
external system, and once this execution completed in the background, right? Then what will happen? Rest of the statement execution, it will check whichever
We
thread is
continue.
available. Thread pool, right? That thread will come for the rest of the statement
Okay.
execution.
Okay. So while waiting for the response from the external system, this thread will be released. And
Yes.
once that operation is completed, any thread, any available thread from the thread pool will come back and handle the asynchronous, the next lines of the asynchronous operations. Okay.
Yes. So only difference is that, so definitely this execution takes means 10 seconds means the next statement is going to be executed after 10 seconds. in the case of a synchronous as well as in the case of a asynchronous. But what is the difference? In the case of a synchronous, my thread is blocked for 10 seconds. With asynchronous, the thread is never going to be blocked. Immediately it is going to be released, right? So the number of requests, right, that my application can handle can drastically increase if I'm going with asynchronous programming. That is the reason why you can see any, right, whenever we are going to work with any database, or whenever we are going to work with any file operations, or whenever we are going to work with some external API, always we need to right, execute such operations in asynchronous manner. Clear? Is clear or not?
Yes.
Very clear. Thank you.
Okay, so
Yes,
this is what important thing that what you need to remember, right? So if people will ask you, how you will decide whether you need to go with asynchronous programming or parallel programming. Parallel programming is completely different. Guys, remember parallel programming is completely different than asynchronous programming. Asynchronous programming is completely different than your synchronous programming. These three are three different approaches. Multi-threading is nothing but that multi-threading is simplifies, right? Multi-threading is simplified using asynchronous programming and parallel programming, right? So now what are the advantages, right? Advantages is you prevent blocking the method, whichever thread is executing your application code, that thread is not going to be blocked. Improve the user experience. That means the user have not to wait, right? User will not wait a longer period of time, right? Right, for getting the response. Why? Because that request is going to be handled immediately. Scalable application means more number of requests your application can handle at the same time. Non-blocking operation means your application is not going to be freeze, right? So how to implement asynchronous programming, that is important. Guys, remember, whatever method we have discussed so far using a Fluent API, each method is having its counter asynchronous version. For example, we discussed a toList method. There is a toList async. We discussed the find method. There is a find async method. We discussed the add method. We are having add async method. We discussed the add range method. We are having add range async method. We discussed save changes method. We are having save changes async method. We discussed the fast method. Fast async is there. Faster default async is there, single method is there, singular default async. So whatever method we have discussed so far, each method having its counter asynchronous part is there, and that what we need to remember use. But the key difference is that if you are working with asynchronous method, then what is important? The return type is going to be task or a task of a T. So what is the difference between a task and a task of a T? Can anybody tell me?
Then task is void when you
Yeah.
return void.
Task is a
And
list
task
of
of T is
task.
no.
So
I think task is no. I
task
think
means
task is
return
void.
type is void.
Yeah,
Task
and
of T
task is
means T can be anything,
anything.
string,
Generic type
int,
and
class.
Yeah, generic.
Okay. Right, so that's fine. But in case of asynchronous programming, I can also write the return type as void. I can write the return type as task. I can write the return type as void. Right? Both are possible. But the question is, what is the difference between them? If I'm creating an asynchronous method, I can write the return type as a task. I can also write the return type as void. They are going to work absolutely fine. What is the difference between them? I can understand task means when the method doesn't return anything, I have to use a task. And whenever the method returning some data, whatever the type of data, that needs to be replaced with this T. That is what I understand. No issue. But my question is now, what is the difference between these two?
With
I think
task, we have to write a wait.
yeah, I wait. Yeah.
With
There you
void,
can
no need
wait.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no need. Yeah.
with void, right? You right with void, you can simply call the method. Whether that method completed successfully, whether that method right completed with some error, that what you
To
cannot change,
continue.
right? But with the task, you have the option, right? Once I call the method, I can wait till that method execution completed, so that I can decide whether the execution completed successfully or not. That's what you can achieve if you are using the return type as a task. That is not possible using point. Clear?
No, sir.
Clear? Yes, so these are the very interesting concept, right? Related to Caesar. Just to try to observe, right? So what we need to do, right? How to implement asynchronous programming? First of all, right? The method, right? First of all, the method should use what keyword? Async keyword. The return type is going to be Return type is going to be task or, guys tell me,
Task or
task or
task of T. Task of
task
T.
T, and each async method body should contain one await operator,
Await.
Await.
right? Await method call. Right? So it should contain one await method call, and this await method call you can use only when you are calling asynchronous methods. Clear? Clear or not? So you have to define the method as
Yeah.
async. The return type is going to be task of T. Within the method body, right? Within the method body, right? You have to use some kind of a await method call, and you can use this await method call only when you are calling the asynchronous methods. And what are the different asynchronous method entity framework would provide? That list I have already given to you. These are the method what I can use. Clear or not?
Sir, can you say one more time that difference between this task and void? I'm not exactly getting that difference.
See, you just tell me, right? Whenever I'm calling one method, right? So if I'm not using await operator, then what will happen? For example, right? For example, I'm creating one public async, and here the return type is void and some method. This is my sum. Right? So here I have written some console dot some statement I have written, right? And here what I'm doing here, I'm just writing some task.delay statement, right? And here I'm writing this await keyword. That's right. Now I'm writing another method, public static, and here I'm writing task, and here I'm writing some method. So this is some method one, and this is some method two, right? So I'm creating here two method. One is some method one, return type is void. Another is some method two, return type is void. Now what I can do is I can call this two method from here. So I can call some method one, something like this, right? Public. Let make this a method as static so that I can call that method directly. Public static. Here also I'm calling the static method. Now this is some method one, and this is my some method two, right? So now, so once I call this method, whether this method is completed with some error, some exception, right? For example, here I'm writing some throw not implemented exception. Some exception I'm throwing from here. Not here, let's put the statement here. I'm throwing some exception. So now if I'm calling this method, then I don't have that flexibility to handle this exception. I don't have that flexibility to wait till this method execution is completed. I don't have that flexibility. Here I cannot write that await statement. Getting my point? Here, I cannot wait till this method execution completed. If I cannot wait till the method execution completed, cannot give guarantee whether that method is completed successful or whether it is completed with some error.
No, you can't.
So in that case, what I can do is only I'm calling the method. What is that method is doing, whether completed successfully or not, that what I cannot say. That guarantee is not available when you are using the return type as point. But if you are using the return type as a task, it's here you can use the await keyword. Right? Here, why I'm getting this error? Because this method is not a static method, async method. Let me put the async keyword here. Right? So here you can see, and as whenever I'm using the await keyword, what exactly it means? It means it will wait till this method execution completed or not.
Yep.
Yes, it
Yes.
will wait.
If it wait till the method execution completed, while executing the method, if there is some exception, then that exception is going to be handled by the method right from where we are calling this statement. But that is not possible using this is a first method call. Why? Because the return type is void. And here the return type is task. Task means you have the chance, right, to check whether the method execution completed successfully or whether it is completed with some kind of error. And if error, then you can also have the chance to handle that error within your application. But that is not possible if you are using the asynchronous method with the return type point. Clear or not?
Yes.
Clear,
So
sir.
one question, both methods will not block my main thread, or only the second method will not block my main thread.
Both are not going to block. In this case, the
Okay.
method is method is asynchronous. Here, the return type is different. Return type will come into the picture whenever we are returning the data, not whenever I am
Okay.
calling the method. So
Calling.
whenever I am calling the method, this async is coming, right? And whenever I am returning the data, at that time this void is coming, and this return will come when the method execution is completed, right? So in this case, both methods are going to be asynchronous. But the thing is that you cannot wait till the method execution completed. Here you can wait till the method execution is completed. Clear?
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
but why did you put awaiting 57, line 57?
You cannot
Await.
put await here, na. You cannot use await keyword here. Why? Because the
Yeah,
return type is void. So
I
in
know,
this
I know,
Just
but you put
to
await.
show
Oh,
example.
okay,
Just to show
okay, okay,
example.
okay,
you
okay.
can
Yeah, so
simply call the method. You don't have that flexibility to wait till the method execution completed. So in this case, in
okay,
a sequence method, it will go. So this method is going to be executed by a background thread. That background thread means some different thread. And your main thread, once this statement is called, the main thread will move to the next statement. And in this case, the once it call this statement, that main thread will be released, right? And this statement will make sure that this method execution completed, then only I will move further. For example, right? Suppose I'm putting this statement here. If I'm putting this statement here, then immediately after calling this statement, it will execute this statement. It will not wait. The thread will not wait till this method execution completed. Immediately it will execute this statement. But in this case, right, what will happen? Now, in this case, right, after calling this statement, it will wait till the method execution completed. And once this method execution completed, then only the remaining statements are going to be executed. Clear or not?
yeah.
Yes.
But what's the difference between this foreground thread and background thread?
So that is not the scenario, right? That concept I'm not going to explain at this point in time. What do you mean by
Okay.
foreground trend? What do you mean by background trend? That is going to be a right minimum 3 hour session, right? To
Oh,
explain.
yeah, just for 1 minute,
And,
just
and for
example.
your reference, I've already explained what do you mean by foreground trend and background trend in my multi-threading chapters. You can go and watch those sessions.
Okay.
Because what is my fundamental? My fundamental, always I'm saying one thing, little knowledge is always dangerous, and I'm not going to give you any little information, right? If I'm
Okay,
going to
okay. I will
explain,
check it. Thank you.
definitely. The sessions are
Okay.
provided. What do you mean by foreground thread? What do you mean by background thread? How they are executing, right? Everything is provided, right? So is that clear, guys? How to implement asynchronous programming? You have to make the method as async. The return type is going to be task or task of T. The body is going to be have some awaited method call, and this awaited method call you can only use. You can only use this await keyword when you are calling some kind of a asynchronous method, right? So let us try to understand this with one example, right? So for example, we are developing one application to manage the products, right? So let me first create the product entity, and inside that product entity, let me put all this code, right? This is my product entity. So inside this product entity, you can see this is my ID, name, description. Okay, let's put this as an optional column, and this is my price. So let's put this price above the right description. So let us put this optional column in the last position. See, this is all right. There is no such restriction that the order should be like this. You can put them in any random order also. Right. So this is going to my primary key. By default, it is going to primary key. If I apply this keyword, then also it's fine. Name, it is going to be a required field, and required means it is going to be created as a not null column. Maximum 100 character. Price, it is going to be 18 comma 2. Again, it is a required column. Description, it is going to be optional column. Clear or not?
Yep.
Yes. So this is done. Next, what I need to do, I need to define the dbset class. So go to the right entity framework code. Here, I'm simply creating this dbset property, and that's it. It is going to create a database product db. Inside that database, it is going to create this product table. Clear? Anything I need to explain inside this context class?
No.
Nothing. Yeah, this is a very simple thing, right? Which we have already discussed many times, right? So before proceeding further, right, what I need to do, I need to delete these things, right? So let me delete these things. So static void of everything I have to delete. Okay, let me delete this thing also. Let this method call also, right? So these are the things I have to delete. Next, what I need to do, I need to generate the, right, what I can say, migration file. Before generating migration file, please make sure products DB should not be there. Yes, no products DB is there. And right, migration one, build fail. There is some issue. Okay, let us figure out what is the issue. So the type or names could not be found. What is the name? PRODUCT. Even this is not required, right? So we are not using this order item. You can simply ignore them. Right? So what is our requirement? We just using the single table, right? So now, okay, let me build one more time to make sure everything is fine. Yes, build succeeded. Next, right, what I can do is I can generate one more time the migration file, update the database. Yes, the table is created. Product DB
Product.
table is created. Should have the product table, right? That's fine. Now what I'm going to discuss is I'm going to perform right database CRUD operation using asynchronous programming. Let us see how we can implement this thing. Right? So first of all, you can see the signature is async task. Means what? This main method is going to be a asynchronous method, right? From .NET 8, I hope, right? From C# 8, it is possible to declare the main method as asynchronous, right? So in this case, you can see I'm declaring the main method as async. Return type is a task, that's fine. So you can consider void. And here you can see what I'm doing, right? What I'm doing inside this main method, I will discuss later. Let us try to understand this thing. First of all, the syntax we need to understand. So is this method is created with the async keyword and the return type is task or task of T? Yes or no?
Task. It's
Yes,
task.
the return type is a task. Sorry, the
Task.
return type is async. The sorry, method is created with async keyword to make this method asynchronous, and the return type is a task. And guys, remember, so whenever you are creating an asynchronous method as a fundamental, as a standard, you need to create the method name with async. So whatever your method name, suppose it is a create product, and as this is a asynchronous method, so I need to append this async keyword as it is a standard. Not mandatory, but it is a good programming practice. Right. So
Oh,
it is taking
okay.
the context object, and here
Good
it
to
is
know.
checking whether yes, anyone having any question?
No, I said good to know. That is line 33. A sync that you have to put a sync. That is good to know that.
Yes, yes. This is the good programming practice, right? So, right, so guys, remember, whenever I'm developing the application, right, I'm not going to take any specific classes for providing you what should be the good programming practice, standard, optimization. So whenever I'm explaining the concept, I will tell you what is good, what is bad, why it is performance not bad from the performance, how we can improve. Everything only I'm going to take in the example whatever I'm providing, right? So in this case, I'm checking. Now you can check. See, I'm using this context-driven products.any. So why? Because it is going to give me better performance, right? If there is no product, then what I'm doing, I'm going to create the product. So I'm creating one product, I'm creating another product, and then you can see currently what I'm doing, I'm using the add async method. So instead of add method, so you can also use this context dot add async method. That is also possible. Right. So here I'm adding product one, product two. And in this case, you can see this is the asynchronous version I'm using. So whenever I'm using asynchronous version, I have the chance to call this await keyword. So when I'm using await keyword means it will right to do this operation using a background thread, and the main thread is going to be released. So this is another way of adding the context. And right, once we add the product to the context object, right, then I can call the step changes asynchronous method. So instead of step changes, right, I'm calling step changes async, and again I'm using the await keyword. So that means the operation is going to be performed by a background thread. My main thread is going to be released, and it will wait till this method execution is completed. Once this method execution completed, then another thread from the thread pool will come into the picture and execute the rest of the statement. So the point that what you need to remember is you have to mark the method as async if you want to create a asynchronous method. Return type is going to be task or a task of T. How to use a task of T, I will show you later. And for now, it is going to be task. And whenever and within this method, right, you have to use at least one asynchronous call. See, if you are creating one asynchronous method, means what? Right, do you think that right? One more interesting thing. Let me explain. So why we are using asynchronous program? Asynchronous programming is basically meant for what? IO bound operations, right? Am I right?
Yes.
IO
With the
bound.
right operation.
If there is
Right
no IO
operation.
bound operation, right? Guys, remember, nothing is free in this one. So if I'm performing some IO bound operation using asynchronous programming, then behind the scene, something is happening to make that thread released, to make that background thread to execute our application code. So these things are also going to take some time. Getting my
Yeah.
point or not? So nothing is free.
Yeah.
If I'm performing something means something I need to pay for it. So similarly,
Only
if I'm not performing the IO bound operation, if there is no IO bound operation within my method, do I need to make this method as asynchronous?
No.
No.
It's waste of
Right,
time.
remember,
Yeah.
no IO bound operation means the method should not be async. That's what you need to remember. So if I'm making this method as asynchronous, so what exactly it means? It means it will consider, it will check at least one async method call. Otherwise, it will give you some kind of a warning. Okay, let us see. So I'm commenting this statement, I'm commenting this statement. Currently, in my method body, am I having any kind of a asynchronous method call?
No.
No.
Is there any async method call? Asynchronous, am I performing any kind of IO bound operations?
No.
No. If I'm not performing any IO bound operation, then definitely I'll get a warning. And what this warning saying? This this async method lacks await operator and will run synchronously. Consider using await operator to await non-blocking API calls or await the task to do CPU bound work on a background. So what exactly it is saying? So this method, inside this method, you are lacking with the await operator. If your intention to call some asynchronous API call, if you are calling some asynchronous API, please call them, right? Please call them using await operator. If not, then please make this as asynchronous. Otherwise, it will work like a asynchronous method call. So that what if you are getting this warning means what? Means your method, right? Within this method, you are not using any asynchronous method call. So what you need to do, you can make this as await. So once you make this as await, right, you can see you are getting this immediate. Now what I'm doing, I'm not calling this one. Again, see, in this case also, I'm getting this warning. So basically, what exactly it is saying, you have to write some await statement, right? If you are using asynchronous programming, otherwise it will work like a synchronous method call. And if your intention to execute some code in a synchronous manner, then better to declare them as synchronous. Because right, if I'm creating a synchronous for performing, if I'm creating one asynchronous method for performing synchronous operation, then it is going to take more time if I'm doing the same thing, right? With synchronous operations, right? If you are performing the synchronous operation, using one synchronous method and using one asynchronous method, then that synchronous method is going to give you better performance comparing to the asynchronous method where you are performing the synchronous operation. The fundamental rule is that if you are not performing any asynchronous method call, then don't declare the method as async. If you are performing only synchronous method call, declare them as synchronous. If you are performing asynchronous operation, then only consider using asynchronous method call. Clear?
Can we have combination of both?
The combination is fine. So what is requirement? So my requirement is, if I'm calling this asynchronous method, means it should have some asynchronous method call. That doesn't mean I cannot call any synchronous method. So in this case, this any method what I'm calling, it is a synchronous method or asynchronous method.
Synchronous.
So you can have, but what is I'm saying, at least one asynchronous method should be there. If there is no asynchronous method, means you should not declare the method as async. Clear? Even
Yes.
right, this is any, then you can also make use of any async. Right? So this is one asynchronous method call, right? And guys, remember why I'm getting this error? Because I'm not
Oh,
using
Await.
the
Not await.
right. So it is a database call, means you should make this as asynchronous, right? So this is asynchronous, this is asynchronous, right? Similarly, read product list async. So in this case, what we are missing? Can anybody tell me? So in this case, what we are missing?
That as no tracking some.
Yes, we need to use as no tracking. Why? Because in this case, we are retrieving the data only for displaying purpose. So displaying purpose means this data should not be tracked by the context object. So what we are doing, we are using as no tracking. Clear, guys? Yes or no?
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Okay.
This is my update method. So here you can see I'm not using add as no tracking. Why? Because I'm fetching the data for updation purpose. Updation purpose means it should be tracked by the context object. So in situations like this, we should not use as no tracking. So we are fetching the product by the name, and we are changing the price and the description and calling the save changes method. And here you can see while I'm calling the method, I'm using save changes async and I'm using the await keyword. Similarly, this is my delete method. I'm using async and task. I'm using await keyword and finding the, you can see find async method I'm using to find the product by ID. If the product is found, then what I'm doing here, I'm calling the remove method. And guys, remember, there is no remove async method available. So there is no remove async method available. You have to use this remove method. Then you have to call this is changes async, which is going to execute the data right in the database, and then you can write and display whatever you want to do. So is that clear how to create a synchronous method and how to consume or how to call a synchronous method? Is that clear?
Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
first you have to define the method signature with async and task or a task of T. Task of T I will show you later. And then whenever you are calling some asynchronous method, you have to use this await keyword. Now you guys tell me. So like this way, this is an asynchronous method. I'm using the await keyword. Then when I'm going to call this delete product async method, when I'm going to call this method, am I need to use the await keyword?
No,
Yes,
because you are deleting.
So you just tell me, am I going to use the await keyword or not?
I think no.
Why no? If you are thinking no, then why no?
Because you are deleting. You are just deleting it. It's not.
But if I'm
How do
not,
I
if
say?
I'm not
Why do you
going
have
to,
to await when you are deleting? You just delete.
no. See,
You await.
my question is that
You-
as this is a synchronous method, when I'm calling, I'm using await keyword. So if I'm going to call this method from somewhere else, am I need to use the same await keyword while calling this method and while calling this method or not? This method are asynchronous or not?
Yeah. Update is yeah.
As this is a synchronous method, while calling this method, I'm using await keyword. This is another asynchronous method. While calling, I'm using await keyword. Similarly, this is also a synchronous method. So when I'm calling this method, I can also use this await keyword. Let us see how you can do this. So now if you go to the main method, right, then you can see this is my
Excuse me.
create product.
Excuse me.
And here I'm using the await keyword. Yes.
If it is a sync, then for the delete, you also have to use await.
See, you just tell me why I should remove this await. If I remove this await, no issue, right? But what is happening? So if I'm
It's going to
using,
be a
if
sync.
I'm not calling this await method, right, with keyword, then whether this operation is completed successfully or not, is what I cannot identify.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Right? So await method means what? It will wait till the method execution completed. Clear, guys, or not?
Yes, not
So actually, for the CRUD,
Yes.
for the CRUD, you just have to use async and await. That's for the CRUD operation,
Yes.
if I'm right.
Clear, guys, or not? Is that clear?
Yeah.
Anyone having any question, guys?
Yes.
Now let us run the application and see whether this is working as expected or not. See, products added successfully. Product in the database, product with name laptop is deleted, product with ID 1 is updated, and this ID is deleted. Clear? That means the operation is working. Right, and with the asynchronous programming, we have implemented the database CRUD operation. Clear, guys?
Yep.
So, guys, that's it for today. Tomorrow we are going to discuss, right, bulk operation, how to implement bulk insert, update, delete using 3 different approaches, and then I will show you the performance benchmark between these 3 approaches. So I'm going
tomorrow
to
we
show
have
you.
class.
Yes, tomorrow we have a class because we have missed few sessions right in the last week, so I need to
So
cover up.
tomorrow we
So,
will be traveling and also already weekend plans.
sorry,
Weekend traveling and all.
see what I'm saying.
Yeah, but you can watch the video.
Right?
That
So
is
people
fine.
are asking, sir, you are not taking the sessions regularly. And whenever I'm planning to take some session on a weekend, you guys are also saying that you are traveling or planning. I see. Only to weekend session, I can only take if everybody is agree. If a single person disagree, then I will not take. Why? Because weekend sessions are not mandatory. Right? And only I'm going to take if 100% student are agree. If a single person deny, then I'm not going to take.
Sir, please
Uh,
take it on Monday because
then
we are also working professional and we miss out the weekdays lecture. So we are just covering it up on Saturdays and Sundays. So please, I request you to take it on Monday.
Yeah, that's fine. But right, guys, and guys, remember that I don't have any issue. Even I don't have any problem with the number of a days duration at all. But at the same time, I should not get any right call or message from you guys. That's our why it is taking more time. Why you are not taking sessions regularly. So this question I should not get. Sir, you told us to complete the syllabus in 5 months, and why it is taking 6 months? So this kind of question I should not get. That is what my right. What I'm saying. I'm requesting you guys. So whatever syllabus I have provided, my responsibility to complete each and every concept. That might be take some little more time. That what you need to adjust. That is what I'm saying. Because see, I'm a working professional also, and sometimes in weekdays, right? It is also not possible for me to take some of the sessions. And
yeah,
and
but
and,
excuse me. I
and
think
another
if you want to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
it's
Go
and
ahead, sir.
second thing, I can also take the sessions regularly, right? From Monday to Friday without any break. But for that purpose, right? The documentations what I am providing, that what I cannot provide. I can
Yeah,
directly,
excuse me.
I can directly create the example, show the example, but no documentations because preparing the documentation is taking more time. And once the documentation is not ready, I cannot take the session. That is what currently I'm doing. If you guys are ready, sir, no issue.
Sir,
You can take the.
actually, the speed to complete the syllabus is not important. I think so. The understanding portion and the way you are,
Exactly.
providing
Yeah.
us the document,
Yeah,
that
that
is
is good.
very important.
Yeah. And
So
if
I
you want
think
to
so.
take a
Most of the
weekend,
guys won't have that problem that if you are skipping Saturdays and Sundays lectures, or in between if you are not feeling well or you are preparing for Azures and all those stuff. So it's fine, sir. We are also
yeah,
getting some buffer time to cope up the rest of the day. I think it's completely fine, sir.
Right, that is I can understand. But few people, right, right, also they are saying that, sir, you are not taking the sessions regularly. That is what also I'm getting from right few guys,
So in
uh,
this
uh,
batch or in other batches?
right?
I
No,
think people will always complain.
remember, guys, remember. So that is, see, I can understand this situation because see, we are not, I'm not professional, right? What I can say, trainer, and providing training is not my right. What I can say, profession. Right? This is my hobby. I love to teach. My
Yeah, I
profession,
know. I see
I'm
it.
working, software engineer. This is my hobby. I'm taking the sessions, right? And right, unlike other institution where the trainer, their only responsibility to provide daily 5, 6 batches sessions, right, like this, right? That is not what I'm doing. For me, right, the concept is important. Right, explaining the concept is important. I don't think about, right. I'm not bothering about the duration and at all, right? So no matter if it is taking 5 months or if it is taking 6 months, that is not a problem for me. And that is what also I'm saying. You guys don't think too much about the number of days and number of months and the duration at all. And also, I have given access, right? Few members from this batch they requested me. I've already given access to the morning batch or to the completed batch, right? So they can, right? If you are right serious that I want to complete the syllabus in 2 months, 3 months, then just go ahead and watch the recorded session which I have already completed the batch. So just go ahead and right, watch those sessions. But again, right, whatever I have provided on those sessions, right, completed one, and whatever I'm providing to this batch, there is a huge differences. Right? There is a huge differences. Why? Because the completed session, the morning session, and this session, right? If you can say whenever I start the session what completed and the session what I'm taking in the morning and the session currently I'm taking in the evening, in each batch, right, I'm improving myself, uh, right, in terms of explanations, in terms of examples, and in terms of new concepts, right? And definitely in each batch, right, in upcoming in each new batch, if you compare to the previous batch, some new concepts are being added, some right better explanations are going to be provided, and some better real-time examples are going to be included. That is what you can consider. Okay. Clear?
Excuse me.
Yes.
Yeah, I think just like you said, it is very important. We have the documents. That is very important for us. But for the weekend, look, we just because few people doesn't want to take, it doesn't make sense for you to say I'm not going to take it. You have the video. We can vote. If 70%
So
of
the
people
see,
say
see,
it's
see,
okay,
see,
then we can just go
whatever
ahead.
you are saying, whatever you are saying, I truly understand. But also many members are here. They don't want to watch the recorded session. They are fully interested only for the live session. They are not bothering about the recorded session. Even you ask
Yeah,
me,
definitely. I've seen that.
you ask me, sir, I'm providing one recorded session. Please watch that recorded session. I cannot consider it even for the 10 minutes. But if you ask me for any live seminar, then I can consider to completely 2 or 3 hours. That doesn't a problem for me. But
S-
watching the recorded session, right? That is, I generally not feel good, and I generally not consider that on such concepts, right? So few
Yeah,
members,
certainly.
not few, many members are there here also. They are fully depending on the live session rather than the recorded session. What I have told,
Sir,
if at least one member if denied to attend the weekend batch, I'm not going to take.
sir,
That
we
is
can do
Okay.
next weekend. Maybe then everybody will be well prepared in advance. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
but
next weekend we
yeah,
will
but
have
there will be
session.
someone. There will also
say
be someone who will said no.
why I'm
One
saying
person is
because
too
right,
much, too small.
yeah, so
Because
next
if we
weekend,
continue,
right?
someone will always say no.
Next weekend I might not be available because right,
Yeah,
my
see.
second maybe the delivery date is 13th of November. So at
So I
that
think,
time,
sir,
Sir, like maybe I want to add you like maybe if you wanted to take another 15 minutes or 10 minutes in the days itself, you can add that 15 to 20 minutes. So
see,
whoever are
see,
in rush or maybe that will be, but not
you
the
just tell
weekends
me.
because yeah.
Okay, you just
Yeah,
tell
because
me.
we don't want. Others doesn't
Okay,
want
okay,
to.
so
It doesn't make
whatever
sense.
you are
That is
asking, see, let me complete first. So whatever you are
We don't
saying,
want the weekend, sir,
everyone
because
doing the same thing. That's it.
not we,
Whatever.
you.
First, listen me, guys. Whatever I'm saying, right? Whatever you are talking, right? Saying already, I'm taking the same step. So you are saying that please take some additional 15-20 minutes in each day. So what is the session duration when we start? I have told you 90 minutes, 1 hour 30 minutes per day. Am I taking 1 hour 30 minutes per day, or I'm taking more than 2 hours?
No, it's actually it's
It's
very
more than 2 hours, sir.
yeah, it's going more hours means